This meeting is being recorded.
Just a few more seconds. We'll let someone tell
Yeah, no problem. I was going to jump in.
Oh, sorry, John.
I'll
Just,
wait. No problem. No problem.
more seconds just to let that level off. And yep, perfect. All right, John, you're good to begin.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of Waterford Chamber, may I extend a warm welcome to you all, to you, Minister Darragh O'Brien, our board directors, our chamber members, to our housing engagement event this morning. I know, Minister, you have visited Waterford in the past and have featured in our network magazine, so you will be au fait with the opportunities that a properly developed and supported city and region can deliver in line with the National Development Plan. The South East needs Waterford to be a strong regional capital city. It is imperative if we are to create and maintain a city which is socially, environmentally and economically sustainable, a city and county to do business in and to do business with. The provision of proper housing solutions is critical in this regard. The implementation of and support for innovative solutions will sustain the city, the development of the city and the region over the coming years. As the largest business membership network in the South East, the Chamber of the Year in 2020, we are ambitious in our thinking and look forward to significant business development and both public and private investment in line with the National Development Plan in the years to come. We have, in the past 12 months, engaged with Minister Coveney, Billy Kelleher, MEP, and local deputies on the economic challenges, including those that a housing market present. More recently, when we spoke with your colleague, Minister Harris, before Christmas, it was a positive engagement in terms of the need for proper and sustained funding to support the growth in our educational aspirations and intentions as a technological university city and region. Whilst the educational funding is just one element of the delivery of the technology university, we need to deliver a supporting student accommodation model which is sustainable, innovative and environmentally friendly. Of course, there are other considerations in terms of the wider private and social housing delivery and the availability of lettable units as the city expands to meet the needs of our communities. We acknowledge that this delivery is challenged throughout the country, but we require innovative thinking in the way that it is planned for, funded, and ultimately delivered in a cost-effective manner by both the private and public sector. How can the challenges faced in this regard be tackled? For us, engagement is key across all stakeholders. This morning is for us a step forward in this regard, although one of many as we move through the housing challenges. The impact of not taking the right actions will be felt in political, community and business circles and will severely impede our regional development in the years to come. Business development and housing provision are intrinsically linked. We must be able to provide housing solutions that will work both now and in the coming years, are flexible and deliverable in a realistic timeframe. I know that our contributors this morning will positively challenge existing measures and offer solutions, and we look forward to your own responses in this regard. So, without further delay, I'd like to hand it over to Niall Harrington to begin proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and good morning, Minister, and many thanks for attending this webinar with us and listening to us. I'm a Director of Chamber of Commerce. I'm the Chair of the Strategic and Economic Board within the Chamber. I'm also founding partner of Fior Harrington Architects, and I'm also the founding partner of Whitebox, a property development company. So I've kind of got a unique insight across a number of sectors. So what I wanted to do today was to bring some of the collaboration that we've been doing through our Chamber Board, the Strategic and Economic Development, and specifically looking at where Waterford can play its part, because our housing issue is not any particular sector, it's across all sectors. And as far as we're concerned, any house that's delivered or built addresses the overall challenge. So I mean, what we are looking at in the chamber in our particular group is Waterford, by its size and targeted growth under the National Development Plan, is a unique scale to target delivering of pilot housing solutions. Our current population is somewhere between 55 and 60,000, and our growth is targeted up to a minimum of 35,000 people. So we're a nice size that we can take on these piloting proposals. And looking at that, we're also Waterford is, as the regional catchment of over 600,000 population, is the largest regional city catchment outside of Dublin. We've also 5 regional towns, so we can easily filter positive outcomes of any of our piloting into these larger towns. And we also have a broader spread of smaller towns as well. So, I mean, we see ourselves as leading the Regional Ireland Challenge. We're also unique in terms of, Waterford's also unique in terms of our housing solutions that are required to address the housing needs currently. I mean, we have social affordable housing requirements, private and rental housing, independent elderly, but we also have student and tourism housing requirements to be delivered, because we've got growth in those sectors as well. So we can look at all of those housing solutions. And also Waterford is the closest and the largest regional catchment city to Dublin. And with almost 2 motorway links. So we have a lot of positive, but we have a lot of challenges. Investment is a big challenge for Waterford, because we're not seen in a similar light as the 4 other regional cities by the national or foreign investors. There's a number of reasons for that. Our market values, we're still below our nearest regional city competitor. We're probably 15% below that, and we have to address that. City University is a challenge for us in terms of foreign direct investment, but I think we have a solution that's coming on board. But I think what's also important is that the regional city has the regional city capital should have the headquarter campus for that university. And connectivity is a challenge. The airport, the rail, and the N25. The airport, William will talk about probably later on, but also, and the government are working with us on that, and we very much welcome that. The rail solution, the connectivity to Dublin, will be addressed hopefully with the North Quays. So again, these are challenges, but there's solutions there. So where are our opportunities? Our opportunities exist in terms of our value for money offering in all housing sectors. We have strong employment growth, and our attractiveness for relocators with the best place to live in Ireland in 2021. People that do come to Waterford to live stay in Waterford. So we have great quality of life factors, and that's important post-COVID. But also from an employer's perspective, we have a lot of employee retention. So there are opportunities that we can consider around all of that. So what we don't want to do is, there's a lot of people out there that are brighter and more intelligent than us that have all of the big solutions. And we don't see ourselves, what we want to do is how can we maybe create some of the small ideas that can help promote things out of Waterford, and also then maybe how that can be brought forward into the other regions and maybe into Dublin itself. So, I mean, one of the big ones would be building renovations. And we very much welcomed the government's announcement of the grant aid for building renovations. And that's very much important for places like Waterford to add vibrancy and attractiveness to our city centre, but equally important for cities such as Kilkenny, Carlow, Wexford, which are all within our catchment, and then in our smaller towns such as the likes of Dunmore East or New Ross or whatever. We've got a lot of derelict properties in there. So how can we go and challenge those and bring those properties back into life? Funding is obviously a big challenge, but what we're doing in the chamber is to encourage people, is to get people that are owners of these properties to invest emotionally and financially, and to incentivize them to consider reinvestment in their property. And we're looking at in the chamber, we're putting together some exemplar projects that will show how renovations can be done and the easy steps and the rewards out of those. And these are exemplar projects that were prepared by local industry representatives, including architects, quantity surveyors, bankers, accountants, marketing guys, solicitors, and real estate. So what we want to give people is a holistic overview of how it can be achieved. What we're also looking at is maybe the potential, and this is one maybe for the government to consider, is pension plans. I mean, a lot of these vacant properties are privately owned, and could it be considered that maybe these properties could be put into personal pension plans and used so that, for example, if the rental income coming back out of these pension plans would be 100% tax-free. So I mean, that would be an incentive for people to take ownership of these properties, but also to invest in them. And as we know ourselves, the pension pot is dwindling in Ireland. We're always told that bricks and mortar are always seen as a good pensionable investment. So maybe that is something that we could work on with the government to consider. The other areas we considered as well was modular units. I think with modular housing, and particularly the large apartment area, there's still a consumer confidence for scale, and scale comes at a cost. We're doubting Thomases in Ireland, and we like to touch and feel things before we invest in them. But the larger scale modular is still not there at the moment, and we've looked at them all. We've looked at a lot of the English players coming to the market as well. But what we do have in Ireland, and we have them in Waterford, is the smaller modular companies that can make the likes of the Shomra, your garden room, or your detached room, or attached for that matter. And what we're suggesting here is that current planning legislation allows you to build 40 square meters of single story attached extension to the family home. Why would we not allow that extension be detached from the family home? And the reason for that is there's a number of reasons for it. But one is, when you're asking somebody to add an extension, or allow them to add an extension such as a modular extension, you can quite easily fix the cost of the modular solution, but then you've got to interfere with the house itself. So you've got the connection issues, and then when you're connecting, more than likely it's the kitchen area has been connected to, you're into a new kitchen, you're into new floor finishes, and you're into costs associated with the renovation of the house, which can add significantly to the overall cost of just providing a simple solution. The other issue is it's the inconvenience and the hassle it causes to the family home during the additional stage. What it also means is that if, for example, we could build the extension detached from the family home, it would also mean that things can be done quite quickly, quite innovatively, and also it can add to new housing solutions. For example, if the extension could be that you could provide a detached extension of up to 40 square meters once you didn't reduce your garden area by probably 25-30 square meters. Once the deed of the house included the new extension, so therefore it wasn't going into multi-use or multi-ownership solutions. But also what it could be is that the unit itself could be used for multi-use. I know the government were proposing that, for example, with Waterford, we have a lot of student accommodation needs, and maybe let out the spare bedroom. But as a parent of student girls, I can guarantee you, I wouldn't want any of them living in my house, coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning with all that comes with it. But anyway, that's for another story. But a detached solution would make it maybe more attractive for a family to look at that and consider that as an option. Also, it means that it could be considered for an elderly family relative, freeing up the family home that could go back into the market. For example, in tourism areas, it could be considered as Airbnb, as an Airbnb solution to deal with that, freeing up the likes of holiday homes. So I think there's something around that whole modular space that if we look at it at smaller bite sizes to introduce modular into as a working solution into the market, I think it could be seen as very attractive and an easier fit for it. And particularly in Waterford's case, because of our size and scale and the housing sectors that we need to address, it could be something that we should consider and look at. The other and final issue we considered as part of our group is how we could expedite the delivery of housing, and having delivered a number of housing units through the HFA funding, through approved housing bodies support, it can be quite cumbersome and quite lengthy. For example, if you are required to, if you deal with an AHB and you have to get Part 5 approval before you'll get the heads of terms from the approved housing body, then the approved housing body must go for CAF funding, which can take up to 6 weeks. Then they need to go for HFA funding, which can take another 8 weeks. And none of these steps can work concurrently. It's all one step after the other. And the underlying issue is that process can take somewhere between 3 and 6 months, or sorry, 3 to 9 months. But from a developer's perspective, our tenderers, we must have our builder's price in once we, at the stage we agree the heads of terms with the approved housing body, which is month 1. And we're being asked to hold the prices for maybe 6 to 9 months. So it's a big problem, but we have a solution. And it's a bigger problem given that building materials and labour prices are changing, and builders are reluctant to even hold their prices for 6 months. So our suggestion is very simple: introduce a file sharing solution such as Sharebox or Dropbox, where all of the information that we would have to give to an approved housing body is on Sharebox that the CAF people and the HFA people can access and enter into. It would also mean that if we set up a simple template for evaluation purposes, that template could sit at the same, that the approved housing body, the HFA or the CAF people can actually use the same valuation, so that you're not having to get 3 valuations on the same property. And we believe that that simple solution could actually take a couple of months off the process. It also means from a legal perspective, you've got sometimes you've got 3 or 4 firms of solicitors working on the same building solution proposal as it goes through the various stages. That would also speed up that process, because now your legal teams are all looking at information in real time. What we'd also like to consider is that the formal Part 5 agreement, that maybe the legislation could be brought in that could be agreed post the notification decision and pre the grant of planning decision. So therefore, once the grant of planning permission comes through, you've got your Part 5 in place, and then you're straight into the approved housing body with your heads of terms, rather than the housing body waiting for the decision. Then you're in with the local authority to get your agreement, and then you go off with your housing body. I think that would that could take some time off it as well. And I mean, we have delivered housing, or we're delivering housing from everywhere from Westmeath to Waterford across to Limerick. And the timelines on securing Part 5 agreements has been anything from a day to 15 months. So again, that has a huge impact on the delivery of housing. And the last one then we would ask maybe to consider is that if the approved housing body are going for CAF funding or HFA funding, if we had a share box, would it be possible that those applications could run concurrently? So rather than wait for 6 weeks for CAF funding and then a further 8 weeks after that for HFA funding, if they ran concurrently, you could compress that down to a 6-week process and maybe knock the 2 to 4 month process down to a 2-month process. And I think small changes along that process, and looking at it from, I suppose, the developer's perspective, may help in shortening that period and getting us all working at the same speed. As I always say, it's a bit like our wheels are spinning faster than maybe the local authorities' wheels or the AHB's wheels. So that, I mean, if we're all on the same page, all in the same share box, and all working off the same documentation, I think that could speed up the process. So there, to recap, are our 3 simple solutions to maybe helping and putting our shoulders to the wheel in Waterford, looking at building renovations, modular units, and maybe expediting the HFA process. Thank you, Minister, for your time.
Sorry, John, you're muted there.
Technical hitch, apologies. Regina, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Ara, I am absolutely delighted to address you this morning, both as a director of Waterford Chamber, but also as a business owner of an estate agency, Liberty Blue Estate Agents, in business in Waterford for 25 years. There are 3 items that I would like to highlight to you that would improve the rental market in Waterford and in the rest of the country. 1, a different approach to the tax treatment of private landlords, a tax break for student accommodation to free up housing stock, and a reconfiguration of the €30,000 grant scheme to first-time buyers and extending it to other participants, which would also entail a reconfiguration of our government's approach to vacant premises. So the rental market is in absolute crisis. Today in Waterford City, there are 13 properties to rent, and one of which is a student property. And that's actually the biggest number I've seen advertised for rent in a very long time. There is a housing development called Templars Hall, which mostly houses students. Surely we'd be better off to have those houses rented to families. We should be housing students in purpose-built student apartments and over city centre shops. Why not introduce Section 50 tax schemes for student apartment blocks strategically located with good governance. This would free up badly needed homes for families, and we will need student accommodation for the Technical University of the South East. Today, if I'm asked to find a house for a family in Waterford, I'd have to put them on a wait list, and it will probably take me 3 months to find one house in Waterford City. I've never, ever seen the situation so bad in my 25 years in the business. In actual fact, Liberty Blue Estate Agents, we closed our doors at the start of COVID almost 2 years ago, and we've never opened our doors since. Yeah, we are open for business, of course, but it's appointment only. And the reason our doors are closed is because we cannot cope with the people outside the door who want to rent property. They are crying at the door and they're distressed on the phone. And my team are distressed, as am I, about the situation. We need new supply, and we are reliant on the private landlords, and they're fleeing the market. It doesn't make sense for landlords to stay in the market right now. 2,080 landlords exited the market last year around the country. We absolutely need to keep private landlords in the market. We need incentives. Who are private landlords? For example, we have a couple, Deirdre and Sean. And when they got married, they moved into Sean's house and they rented out Deirdre's house. And Deirdre still has a mortgage on her former home. The tax treatment of private landlords isn't equal to the tax treatment of big funds. In actual fact, we have a landlord called Pat who lives out of Ireland. He's an overseas landlord, and he pays in the region of 20% tax versus Sean and Deirdre, who live on the Dunmore Road, who pay in the region of 50% tax. Then put all the expenses on top. And from €1,000 rent a month, Deirdre and Sean get in the region of €400. Although lots of our landlords don't even have enough money to cover the mortgage. So we had a landlord in the office last week. Her name's Bridget, and she was actually really distressed because she got hit overnight with the rent pressure zone. So her rent today is €570 a month. That's not enough to cover her mortgage. She's allowed to increase her rent by €12 going forward. So her mortgage is 900 and the market rent is in the region of €1,000 for her house. Yet she gets 570 before expenses. Surely landlords should be paying tax on profit. This isn't a sustainable situation, as we can clearly see. Why, Minister, not give Bridget a tax credit? Surely being taxed on a negative position of minus €330 per month is very unjust. Landlords like Bridget actually don't have any money to do maintenance. And we can see that we manage a portfolio in the region of 400 properties. We'll continue to see the situation deteriorate until proper action is taken. So I'm asking you, Minister, would you engage in a meaningful way with the people in the industry who know what's really going on the ground? Now, Minister, it's absolutely great to hear about the new grant for 30,000 to help people buy derelict properties to renovate in and live in. You mentioned recently vacancy is an untapped resource that we should be using. I 100% agree. However, is it really going to work? In my opinion, most people who have an appetite to do big renovation work in actually property or construction. As an estate agent for over 25 years, most people, in my view, cannot visualize how a property will be when it's presented in really bad condition. And the average family doesn't have the time or the know-how to do a massive renovation on a derelict property. I think our government needs to support and encourage co-ops, which include experts such as architects and builders coming together to actually make it happen. Will this grant in isolation be user-friendly? And is 30,000 really enough? Why does it have to be limited to homeowners? Why not open it up to everybody, as it'll create new stock for housing? Personally, I'm of the view that this grant could be like a car with no engine. However, with further expansion and turnkey solutions, it could be really impactful for our cities and towns across the country. There are too many properties sitting idle. CPOs and vacancy tax should free up more stock. Can you review how the CPO process can be accelerated, Minister? Now, the current 25-year lease scheme I'd love to talk about, whereby investors lease property to councils for 25 years, and yet there's no equity at the end of this lease. Doesn't make sense in the long term. For example, an apartment that costs 120,000 is purchased by Larry today, who leases it for 25 years to Waterford Council at a rent of somewhere in the region of 270,000 over a 25-year period. This amount paid out for the lease might work out at 3 times the amount that Larry paid for the apartment. That doesn't even take inflation into consideration. It's dead money paid out by the state, I suppose us really, the taxpayer. And surely it makes sense for our councils to be funded to purchase the property instead of Larry. You're setting up a new dedicated vacancy unit in the Department of Housing, Minister. This is very positive. As I understand, a dedicated team will work on dealing with vacancy, which will be tasked with making sure that local authorities deliver a consistent level of properties. All of us in business are here to meet targets, and we have to be held accountable. Will there be clear metrics, and will people be held accountable to deliver on this promise? 45% of units delivered across the Repair and Renew scheme nationally has been brought on stream by Waterford. It's a great testament to Waterford Council. But when you look at 23 local authorities nationally who've delivered less than 5 homes under the scheme in the past 4 years, that baseline is seriously low. I personally think they're dismal figures, and hopefully with the resources now being given to a dedicated vacancy unit, we will see real numbers that will make a real difference. Considering Waterford has in the region of 5,200 vacant properties sitting empty right now, I'd ask you to consider rolling out a really big PR campaign, because it's a very well kept secret. And we should share this because it's a win-win for everybody. Finally, Minister, Waterford has been voted the best place to live in Waterford, and we're very, very proud of our city and our county. And I'm asking you, Minister, review the tax treatment of landlords like Bridget, Sean and Deirdre. Help us keep these landlords in the market, because we desperately need the supply. Review this grant allocated for derelict properties. Don't limit it to homeowners. Commit to delivering resources for a vacancy homes unit. Announce targets and deliver meaningful numbers on 5,200 vacant homes in Waterford. Gurv Magod.
Thanks very much, Regina, for that comprehensive update. I'd like to call on Willie Bolston now, please, if you would. Thank you.
Minister, thanks very much. It's William Bolster from Bolster Group. I'm here representing, I suppose, the developer's point of view. And I suppose while it's easy to sell ice cream in the summer, there are many challenges in developing. So I might be the last person the Minister wants to hear from. But anyway, I know you're busy, so I won't delay. 3 items, I suppose. The general consensus in the industry would be that Irish Water is single-handedly slowing down the release of housing to the market. There are many examples, but just to take one, a small to medium-sized estate received planning on time from the council, no objections, never went to the board. However, it took 13 months from planning to receive the connection agreement. This then had fees of 10,000 per house, but as a double whammy to the purchaser, the house during that 13 months, the house went up by 8%, adding in nearly another 30,000. So very difficult to achieve affordable housing or solve the housing needs in that environment. 2, the finance would have been previously been a hindrance to development. However, due to the many new finance houses entering the market, this has become a little easier, but is expensive. So is adding more to the cost of the houses. Does the Minister feel that the government, along with the state banks, are missing out on an opportunity to A, increase the flow of funding at better rates, which will then increase the supply of houses and reduce prices, and B, the state would share in the profit through the banking system while also controlling the mortgage side, thus mitigating any risk to the state and not finding ourselves back in the crazy days previously? And then third, finally, on a positive and a solution to fix the housing supply, and following on from many ideas that Niall has, and I've worked with Niall on some of these, volumetric construction or offsite construction. The skill and knowledge are there, some of whom, as I said, are on the call today. However, due to the level of investment needed to start, I would suggest a PPP type approach together with the land agency, whereby the state and private sector would deliver a supply of affordable housing using state land and volumetric construction, which would take the land profit element from the transaction, thus reducing the house price, with a factory rolling out 1,000 units per year, each factory minimum. Volumetric construction has another major advantage that gets overlooked. It will significantly help solve the skill shortage that faces the industry by attracting new age tradesmen and tradeswomen to the industry, as they would now work in a factory environment whereby 80% of the house is constructed in a factory setting. This will also allow people to upskill, where robotics, IT, engineering will become more the norm. So I suppose that's my contribution, and thank you for the opportunity to voice your concerns. I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Okay, thanks very much, William. Minister.
Sorry, John. Can I just cut in there just for a second? I just that box, and it's something that just follows on from what William was saying there, and it might be worth Minister just as well. And it's from Michael Flynn. FLI Homes have developed a large-scale modular solution for residential and commercial developments. Unfortunately, we are stuck in the NSAI process for agreement certificate approval. This is a frustrating process, as no timelines are provided for the duration of the process. It is counterproductive to the private sector investing in modern methods of construction, and the Minister helped to address the NSAI logjam. I'll just leave that with you, Minister, and over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Minister, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John, and everyone who's on the call, and in particular to Niall, Regina, and William, for your contributions. And maybe just before, because there's some really good, not just suggestions, but points and solutions. So I have to say, firstly, if I go back, to when I met Gerald and the team, I've been in Waterford on a number of occasions, and I was down obviously to announce the urban regeneration and development funding for the North Quays. Waterford, firstly, if I could say, it's a city and county I know extremely well. It has immense potential. It has a lot of people like yourselves with serious drive, but pride in their area, and we can see the vast potential that's there. That's why the team, in fairness, with Michael Walsh and Ivan as well in the city and county council working with the chamber are very important, because there's a vision for the region and for the area, and Waterford as the city that anchors that region. Certainly there is vast potential, and I think at the very start Niall mentioned the value for money element that is there. We've already, in a short space of time, in 18 months, provided I what is a serious vote of confidence for Waterford with regard to the 110 million euro funding that we have granted for the North Quays project, which will unlock that area, has the potential to. We need to see it happen, but also in relation to providing additional homes within the city, a new public transport hub, a new train station, all of those various things that are really important. So one of the things that struck me on the visit that day, the weather was a lot worse firstly than it is today here as well, was that I visited a lot of that vacant property that Regina is talking about, and I sat down with Michael Walsh and with Ivan, the Director of Service, and looked at what they were doing and they are doing in relation to helping to bring vacant property back into use. And since then, I've been working on measures to enhance the repair and lease scheme, which I did by upping the allocation to 60,000 per unit from 40,000. That has had an effect already. But also in relation to looking at planning and planning exemptions and what we can do there. I was struck in Waterford when I was visiting a couple of the properties that where properties were being redone, and then next door there was a vacant pub. And the difference between getting a pub into use, which are generally speaking very prominent properties in most of our towns and cities across the country, is that there was an onerous planning requirement that was there. And I'm going to be changing that actually next week. I bring regulations to the committee to exempt development from the conversion of public houses and other commercial properties into residential, where appropriate. A lot of them are older buildings. That came directly from Waterford, and that is one of a number of changes which I'm bringing forward. So maybe just to take a step back, if I could, John, just before I respond to a number of the very good points that have been raised here, I think I want to put what we're doing in context and where we are. I'm firstly delighted to be housing minister, and it's something that I see in my own area in Dublin Fingal on the East Coast, not too far from you, is young and not so young couples and individuals who can't buy homes, is vacancy rates that are too high, is long social housing lists, high rents. So there's a number of very significant challenges that we have. So in the first year, what I wanted to do was to make sure that we build the foundations to deal with these problems. So we brought in the Affordable Housing Act, which is the first time that and the most comprehensive piece of affordable legislation that has been brought in, which will enable affordable purchase across the country. And I'll talk about Waterford specifically in a moment. Cost rental, long-term secure rental backed by the state as well, which we have our first tenants in place both in Dublin and in Kildare. And I see that expanding out into Waterford as well. And then also the use of state-owned lands, where I had to look at the Land Development Agency and to see how that was actually working, and to put that on a statutory legislative basis to get that funded as well. So we're going to have that agency funded to the tune of about €3.5 billion. And you're going to see them breaking ground now this year. So whilst we're doing that, we're all dealing with COVID. Regina has mentioned the impact it's had on her business and many others, and we got to keep operating. And the construction sector was impacted by that, and Williams sector as well. We've had two very significant construction shutdowns, excuse me, which the sector, in fairness, is making up for some of that lost time. So I suppose I'm putting that in the context to say that's the situation we had been working with for the last 18 months to 20 months, whilst dealing with 10 years of undersupply. Now, thankfully, though, the indications, and I'll talk about the policy, the indications for this year and beyond are good and are positive. We're seeing a substantial increase in housing commencements, up to about 42% in 2020. So about 31,000 new commencements, excuse me, 39,000 new planning permissions for homes. And very importantly, though, I think as well, when you look at the financials, over €10.5 billion in mortgage drawdowns, about 44,000 mortgages, the highest number since early 2009, with first-time buyers being the representing the largest cohort within that. So that's happening whilst we were producing our own Housing for All plan. So the first time a government have brought forward a multi-annual, multi-funded housing plan. So the difference between this plan is we know what capital we're investing in housing. So it's over €4 billion a year, both public and private, to go into both sectors to actually boost that supply that Regina has been talking about, and that the Chamber have been looking for, because we need to see that. So we'll probably conclude this year with over 21,000 housing completions in 2021. And we're projecting forward into this year for a significant increase in that. But where we need to be is 33,000 on average, and building that up to 40,000 between now and the end of the decade. So Housing for All is a plan that sets us on the way to delivering 300,000 new homes, because we need new stock as our population grows, and to make up for the lost time that we have had over the last number of years. So it looks to invest in that through affordable and social homes, 9,000 new social homes to be built this year, 2022. And for the first time, every local authority now has to deliver a housing action plan to me that sets out their housing targets between now and 2026, both for private, affordable and social, because we need to have that oversight. But the good thing is that the local authorities like Waterford City and County Council now know what funding they have on the public side. They know what funding they have right the way through to 2026. I think that is really crucially important. So Housing for All in itself is the single biggest intervention that any government has made in housing financially, and it's needed. But there are many things on the policy side and the process side that also need to change, and particularly in relation to tackling that resource that is untapped around vacancy. Look, people differ for how many vacant units there are, what one would define as vacant too, and be that derelict or vacant are two different things as well. So how do we get empty properties that are in the main streets in our towns and villages and in our cities back into use? And how do we get derelict properties converted back into use? And how do we use the above shop, which is a particular nut that has not been cracked over a long number of years? So twofold. One, yes, I am working on a grant through the Croí Cónaithe Towns and Villages Fund. We're not concluded with that, Regina, so I'll take any feedback that I've got here today, but it will be pointed as well at trying to help owner-occupiers initially, and we will roll that out further. And that would not just be for derelict properties. Now, I'm looking at properties that are vacant over a certain age that have not been used. We've seen this used quite well in repair and lease, whereby, you know, a lot of the work that's carried out is carried out by local tradespeople as well. And we're going to target it in a way that will look at a pathfinder scheme, so a pilot scheme, look and see how it's working and adjust it as we go forward. So I intend to launch that in Q1 this year, okay? And that is, I don't control the first time buyers grant piece, that comes out of revenue, but on the housing side, it's the first time we'll have a housing specific grant for effectively for owner occupiers. And I think that's important. I'm also reviewing the planning for above shop. And I think Niall will know this as an architect and others that are there on the call, is that if someone wants to convert above shop into basically residential accommodation, you need a lot of money to be able to do that. And there's a lot of regulations that pertain, both on the fire side, the access and egress side, and the planning side. And to be very frank, colleagues, like I don't think that heretofore that any measures to try to unlock the above shop living have actually failed. And we're going to have to be pretty radical in this space. And that will require some tough decisions around planning and around areas like fire certification. So I'm working through that at the moment. And I would encourage the Chamber, if you haven't already, and I'm sure that you have, excuse me, to look at Housing for All, the plan itself, and look what we're saying we're going to do on vacancy. Even if I say so myself, it's a well-structured document. It's 218 different action points. Only last week, myself, the Taoiseach Taoiseach and Minister Ryan, we give our quarterly update. So we report publicly on how we are progressing through the various things we need to do. So we will be looking at trying to help people in relation to unlocking vacancy. Yes, and we will be doing that. I will also be, I'm looking at and I'm bringing forward some planning changes. So I mentioned the public house exemption already in restaurants, and we've further work to do with, excuse me, with regard to above shop. Maybe this is the time firstly to deal as well with the whole area of the rental market. And I think Regina has put it better than anyone could. It is under severe strain, and we need a secure rental market, no question. We need all different forms of tenure in housing. I firmly believe in home ownership. You've heard me say that before on many occasions, and that's why I brought forward the Affordable Housing Act, and that's why we're bringing forward this year direct purchase or direct build affordable purchase homes through the local authorities. We'll also have our cost rental schemes, which will be in place, but also the shared equity first home scheme, which is going to start from the end of Q2. And what that will do is actually help people bridge the gap between the finance that they have, i.e. the mortgage they can get, and the finance that they need with the state taking in equity. That will apply right across the country. I think that's going to have a significant difference and positive change for all those people who feel that they're locked out of the housing market, and will be able to bridge that affordability gap. But even that said, that where my big focus is on home ownership, we do need a functioning and sustainable private rented market. We've about 298,000 tenancies there, and it has been reducing year on year, not just over the last 2 years, but over the last number of years. I think COVID has made it even more difficult for many of the particularly individual landlords that Regina put forward a couple of examples of there. 86% of our landlords are what I would term your mom and pop landlords, and they're the ones who have been exiting the market in particular. And let's be frank as well, they've been to a large degree, as part of the public discourse, that whole cohort of people have been somewhat demonized as well. And we've very good landlords out there. 98% of tenancies operate absolutely fine. 2% of tenancies end up with the RTB in complaints. But one would think, if you listen to the political discourse that is there, is that every tenancy is in conflict, and that is not the case. So what we've done this year, we've had 6 pieces of rental legislation over the last 18 months that have been difficult for some, because that has been to try to deal with COVID to protect tenants. And I'm acutely aware of balancing the needs of the tenant with the rights of the property owner. I don't envisage any major legislative changes on the rental side for this year, because I think we need the regulations to be stable, and we've the 2% rent cap in place. The point, though, on tax treatment of landlords is something that's alluded to in Housing for All as well. There is a difference between a corporate landlord and how they're taxed and the individual landlord, and that does fall under the competence of the Department of Finance because they're tax measures. But having said that, Housing for All is a cross-government approach. We are due, and Regina specifically for yourself, by Q3 this year, to have further options there in advance of the budget that government will look at. And let's be very clear also that if there are measures that are brought in to help the mom and pop landlords, there will be, I would say also those who would completely and utterly disagree with those changes and try to make political capital out of it on the basis of, tax breaks for landlords, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can all see what will come down the track on that. But there is a fact, if we want to create that stable private rental market that's there, and to be able to have more people involved in it, we need to look at fair tax treatment. And that is something that government will and are actually looking at. That review is currently happening. We also need to look at, and the Southeast suffers from this as well, and many of the beautiful areas across the country where tourists is, how short-term lets are actually managed. The Airbnb type letting. And I will be bringing forward regulations in that space, where I'm a little bit frustrated that they haven't been brought in already, but we're concluding work with the Department of Tourism on that, about regulating the platforms. And that means that we would have in the appropriate places at the appropriate time homes for rent. But the idea that we families in hotels and tourists in houses is an anathema to me. Thankfully, we have seen in the last year a 75% reduction in families accessing emergency accommodation through hotels. And we're seeing that reduce more and more, which is good. But I can assure you that when we're looking at the whole rental market piece, there's a number of things that need to be done. And we're working towards that. I will of course engage in with all stakeholders on this, and we're doing so. So I'm happy to receive any suggestions that the Chamber have. Can I just mention CPOs very briefly, if I could? You mentioned a significant figure in the Waterford region of vacant properties. Some local authorities have done this really well, Louth, Waterford, and some have not. And I'm going to get the housing agency involved in this process. Basically, they have a lot of expertise that is there, that the housing agency will manage CPOs and be a resource for CPOs that local authorities across the country will be undertaking. And I do want to see them targeted. We're going to be targeting about 2,500 properties initially, and have that targeted across local authorities. Get the housing agency to assist with that, and in doing so, that will be rolled out this year. Because I think that we can do two things: is get those properties into public ownership, but also where appropriate as well, depending on the mix, that those properties will be purchased by the local authorities and sold back out into the private market. I think we need a balance of it. I've seen it in Waterford through with the repair and lease scheme. What has been asked to me a number of times is, well, look, you know, that's great and it's fantastic that we got people living back into it, but in some places we need to have a mix. Can we not let some of those properties back out on a cost rental basis? And we'll look and see how we can do that. Student accommodation has come up a number of times, John, and Simon Harris and I are working on some measures in that space to be able to bring forward more affordable purpose-built student accommodation. And I'm actually due to meet Simon later this week or early next on this. I think if we can agree how we move forward, it'll have a very positive impact for all our universities and our technical universities right the way across the country. Because there is, again, that if we can unlock, you know, more additional student accommodation that students want, then we're freeing up other properties. So everything in the housing crisis is interconnected, you know, and there are those things that we can do that are actually going to help. Just Niall, if I could turn to a couple of things, I'm conscious of your time as well, but I've taken some notes here, and I know the Chamber will send me a submission. It's been mentioned by Niall and William actually in relation to the off-site construction and the modular build. We need to build scale there. I visited a number of factories, most recently actually in Carlow. I've been in a factory in Limerick, RBK, who are doing some great work there with regard to modular for that are producing through Limerick City and County Council are the client there, which many of the homes that are being used for regeneration within Limerick City are being done by way of modular build. So there's more happening, but we need to be able to show a scale so more can actually invest and actually can see a pipeline of work. The plant I was in Carlow was interesting because it was modular build, but a non-timber framed. It was concrete modular build, concrete poured, and they're doing pretty well actually at the moment. In Housing for All, one thing that's going to help here, we committed to establishing a construction innovation centre, which we don't have in this country. And when you think about all the tradespeople in construction, both from architects right through to bricklayers to electricians, all the innovation that we have around renewable energy, we've nowhere to share that knowledge and best practice. That's going to be established this year, and we committed to doing that, and I think that would be a big step forward. But I'm myself, I'm a big supporter of modular build. There's lots of potential there. I think the suggestion from William as well that we look at some of our state agencies such as the LDA that would be able to enter into contracts for offsite construction to help to build that scale up is a very good one, and one which I've discussed with the LDA and indeed our local authorities. I think our local authorities have a role here where appropriate that they should also look towards modular build, and thankfully some of them are now, and we're starting to see both in Dublin, I've mentioned, in Kildare, Kilkenny, Limerick so far, where modular build, and it is rapid modular build, it's good. The NSAI process I know can be arduous, and particularly with regard to use of new technologies there. If there's anything in particular, William, that you want to send through the Chamber to me, and certainly if something is stuck in that space, I meet NSAI, we all want to make sure that our standards are the best that are there. And sometimes, particularly in the for the reinforced timber build over 4 or 5 stories has been an issue as well, to make sure that we get certification for that. So that may be the issue. If it's not, though, you might feed that through Gerald in the Chamber and get that through to me, and I'll be happy to take that up. The CPOs I've mentioned, and Niall mentioned that well, and we will have a new process through the Housing Agency. I am very interested in his proposals in relation to the concurrent funding applications on CAF and HFA with AHBs, okay? And again, I would be happy to look at that. I did just the week before last is that the, I see someone saying the issue with NSA has not enough staff. So if there is that, feed them through to me, we'll chase that up. But the issue with regard to funding and process for approval of housing, only the week before last, I've launched 2 new processes there to streamline it. One of them is a design guide for our local authorities and for our approved housing bodies. A lot of work has gone into it. So for both internal and external design, that it is like effectively 5 different models for off the shelf. Okay. that's in place. But secondly, and importantly, is shrinking the approval process and the time frame for that. We need more of our local authorities to use the one-stage process that's in place right now. And I'm encouraging local authorities to do more on that. But we also look at make significant changes with regard to the approval process in my department to shorten the turnaround times. And we need to do more there. I actually am holding next week further housing summits with all the local authorities, the chief executives and the directors of housing, again on some of the measures that we've changed already in Q4, but then looking for Q4 last year, then looking forward into this year. 2022 has to be a year of delivery. And I'm insisting on all our partners that it will be. There are challenges there, there's no question, and we're not going to turn it around overnight. But on the delivery of affordable housing, we're going to see affordable housing now for our people delivered this year. I've targeted 4,100. I've some good proposals from Waterford, by the way, that have come into the department. Can't go into any more detail from it, but I have to say that your local authority have been extremely progressive in any of the measures that we bring forward. So I would like to see the cost rental established in Waterford. I want to see affordable purchase established in Waterford. And there are going to be opportunities, I believe, to do that as well. It's going to take a little bit of time, but what our people need to see is delivery. And they need to see delivery and change in some of these areas. I don't want to leave without saying Irish Water, William has mentioned, and that is something that from builders that I get all across the country. The one measure I brought in last July, 12 months, was insisted that Irish Water allowed a self-connection regime. So for qualified builders that they would be able to connect themselves with that certified by Irish Water at the end. They ran that as a pilot scheme. It worked very well. We 9 significant developments across the country use self-connection. That's been expanded further. And I would encourage you, I've been dealing with the Irish Home Builders Association or IHBA and CIF, that for people to look at that as an option. And it's worked very well where it has been. Fundamentally, though, Irish Water needs to have certainty around its funding. And we've provided multi-annual funding between now and the end of 2026 of 6.5 billion on the capital side. And up to my taking over in housing, they never knew what capital they were going to get after any given year. That was a big problem with regard to planning. So we've been able to move ahead now because Irish Water now know what they have, and they do know as well there are areas where they need to improve their processes. They have also appointed a senior executive that will oversee housing delivery and housing for all, and I engage with them on a regular basis. But in no way, shape or form do I want any of our utilities, including Irish Water, to be a barrier to delivering homes. They recognise that procedures need to change, and to be fair, they are. Chairman, I know there was a lot of issues raised today. I tried to cover as many as I could in as short a space of time as possible. Obviously, really welcome the engagement again with the Chamber. I had the pleasure of visiting your offices in the midst of COVID with Gerald there when I was down. I hope to do so again over the coming months, and would very much welcome that. What I would say to people in conclusion is there is no doubt that the challenges that we face are quite extreme in some areas, but are difficult challenges that we're facing, but they're not insurmountable. And I firmly believe that we have the capability, the expertise, the know-how, but more importantly, the determination as a sector, certainly as a government as well, to actually drive on with delivery into this year. And we will see that happening. And we will see small improvements happening that are happening, thankfully, already. But we need to be open to change, and I certainly am. And I've brought forward some quite radical proposals already that I've implemented, such as the shared home, the first home shared equity scheme. And I'm not afraid of making decisions and radical decisions and implementing them where I see they can work. And I really thank you, President and members, for your time this morning and for your engagement. And I hope I've given you some flavour for the work that I'm doing and the department are doing. And I genuinely thank you for your input and look forward to continued engagement with you.
Okay. Thank you, Minister, for your engagement this morning and the frankness of your responses. As you can see, our speakers come with first-hand knowledge. And we know that you carry a significant responsibility in relation to the housing market, but we as a chamber would like to engage with your colleagues, because our contributors this morning have mentioned quite a number of items which you yourself have acknowledged you would like to investigate further. So we would certainly like that opportunity. We will welcome it, and we thank you for offering that opportunity to engage you. I think overall, look, we all want the same outcome, but there needs to be a willingness to listen and consider other options that remain on the table as the housing market evolves over the next while. One of them, as you can hear this morning, time. Time is critical, and you can see there are certainly opportunities to close that gap between the initial thought process and the final part in terms of delivery. So look, we look forward to engaging with your team and to helping to shape that thought process over the next while. Thank to the contributors this morning, to Niall, Regina and William, and everyone else who has joined the call. And again, to you, Minister O'Brien, we say a big thank you.
My pleasure.
Welcome you in the near future to Waterford.
Look forward to it.
And to everyone else on the call, have a good morning and take care. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Minister.
Thanks, William.
Bye.